Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EPC show, Educators, Performers, Creators. This is edition number 16, and today I have with me leaders from the Illinois Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages who are going to share with us a preview of their presentations for the upcoming conference. They are also going to share information about the conference. And I'm sure wherever you are in the world that you can profit from these ladies and what they have to share with us. Now, today we are live and we like your participation. How can you participate? If you are on Twitter, you can tweet using the hashtag ICTFL15 all together, which coincidentally you can also use to follow the conference. What a great opportunity, not only to learn today and to ask your questions live or even after when you can, if you're watching the recording, but also during the conference when teachers share their nuggets and things that they have learned during the conference. Today we have wonderful three teachers, and I will share this at the end again, but you can follow them on Twitter. Here you have their Twitter handles, and the last one, the ICTFL, is the official Twitter handle for the organization. So don't forget to read their tweets and follow them because they are constantly sharing great information for all world language teachers. And that's what they're going to be talking today a lot about, what's coming up in the world of world language teachers, in our world. We're going to start by introducing them. Each of them, if you could please say hello, a little bit of who you are, where you teach. Let's start with Carrie. Hello.
Hi, I'm Carrie Toth. I teach Spanish in Carlisle, Illinois at Carlisle High School.
Thank you. Hello, Linda.
Hi there, I'm Linda Ignatz. I'm a high school Spanish teacher in Frankfort, Illinois.
Thank you for being here. Hello, Ellen.
Hi, I'm also a high school Spanish teacher, and I teach at Mahomet Seymour High School in Mahomet, Illinois.
Great. And as I said, we are live, so whether you are on Twitter with the hashtag ICTFL15, all together, or maybe you're watching on YouTube, you can write comments and we'll do our best to answer all the comments. We do have a comment from Mary Slider. She says, happy to support our Illinois presenters during this EPC show. Looking forward to hearing more about our proficiency presentations from many angles. Thank you, Mary, for your comment. So bring in your comments, bring in your questions, and let's start. Ellen, I hear you're going to be talking to us about the Danielson Domains. Please tell us about that.
Sure, absolutely. So over the past 3 years, ICTFL has had a long-range goal to really incorporate the Danielson domains into our conferences and to provide opportunities for our world language teachers in the state of Illinois to develop and find areas in which they feel they need to grow and to be able to find those opportunities within our organization. So the Danielson domain is particularly what I'm going to be talking about because in the state of Illinois, that's the model that was used as the basis for our new teacher evaluation system. Basically, the Danielson framework is a research-based comprehensive model. It targets best teaching practices, and it's been documented to improve student learning. And it's not just the state of Illinois that's using the Danielson model, but it's also states like Wisconsin and Indiana. And it's not just Danielson, it's other frameworks. The Danielson framework is similar to Marzano's framework and other researchers. So there's lots of good information. But tonight I'm just going to briefly touch on Danielson because that's what we are using in the state of Illinois. So if you can see on the screen, there are 4 domains of the Danielson model. And each one of them has several subdomains. So the first one, of course, is the planning and preparation. And that one, you look at things such as your knowledge of the content and your pedagogy. What's your knowledge of your students? Are you designing coherent instruction? What about your assessments? Are you designing coherent assessments? In Domain 2, you're looking at classroom environment. So what does your classroom look like? How do you organize your physical space? What do you do to incorporate culture in that space? How do you manage student behavior? What are your classroom procedures? Do you have them? And what sort of how are you establishing your culture for learning within your classroom? The third domain is instruction, and within that domain, administrators and teachers are looking at how are you communicating with students within your classroom during your instruction time? What techniques are you using for discussion and for questioning? How are students engaged? And how are you assessing your instruction? And then finally, you have the fourth domain, which is professional responsibilities. And that includes lots of things. Are you reflecting on your teaching? What do you do to reflect? Are you keeping a journal? Are you asking questions? Those types of things. Are you asking yourself questions? Maintaining accurate records. How do you communicate with families? All of that comes into play in Domain 4. A really important part of Domain 4 is also what types of opportunities are you seeking out to become involved in professional organizations? How are you growing and developing professionally? And how do you show that you are demonstrating professionalism? So there's lots of really good information out there on the internet. There's a lot more information than I could possibly talk about in the few minutes that I have. So if you have questions about the Danielson domains, if you do just a quick Google search, you can find lots of information about it. There's also a book, the Danielson Domain book, that you could purchase. So there's a lot of information out there. As a world language educator myself, and I've used the Danielson framework to evaluate myself and also to be evaluated, but I feel like it's a place where it's a framework where I can see where I can grow, where I need to grow, and I've used it to also use it as a reflective piece to help me expand in my learning opportunities and the opportunities that I can provide for my students. So our conference in the fall of 2014, our conference was specifically geared toward the Danielson domains. So within our conference grid, participants could see the domain that we were specifically targeting. So those participants came away with a sense of, okay, this is something that I could work on in Domain 1, in Domain 2, etc. So for our Fall Conference 2015, we're continuing to do this. We have over 60 sessions, and each session is targeting one of the 4 domains, and participants can see that in their conference grid. So if they feel like Domain 1 is an area where they really need to beef up and get some more professional development, then they can attend more of those, or whatever the domain may be. So they can see what domain is being targeted, and then they can go and attend those different sessions.
Great. Ellen, we do have a question for you from Lori Clark related to the Danielson Rubric. Lori asks, what strengths do world language teachers demonstrate via Danielson Rubric? What can you tell us about that, or your interpretation of that question?
Sure, that's an interesting question. I think for a lot of teachers, that's the answer is sort of, it's a personal answer because each teachers have different strengths. But I think in general, overall, world language teachers do a really good job of connecting with their students. They do a good job. If you look at a world language classroom, world language classrooms look very different than most other classrooms. You know when you're in a world language classroom. So there's, I think we do a really good job with our classroom environment. But I do want to point out that the Danielson model is not specifically geared towards world language teachers. And there are other resources out there that take the Danielson model and take a look at what that really looks like, what's best practice in a world language classroom. So there's one particular website that I'd like to mention. It's the TEL Project, and that website is telproject.org. And there's a lot of really wonderful resources out there, and you can see how those frameworks marry up with what best practice looks like in a world language classroom.
Great. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, sorry.
Okay.
But I'd like to ask you a specific question on ways that you have found to look at your instruction specifically and improve it. Are you using peer observation? Are you reviewing earlier lesson plans and how they have worked? How do you reflect on your instruction to improve it, to improve in that area?
I think there's lots of tools that you can use. One of the things that I do is in my lesson plan book, I have a little area that says reflection. And so every day, at the end of the day, I sit down and I think about, okay, this particular lesson, how did it go? What are my observations? How did students respond to this? What could I change to make it better? If I'm using an authentic resource, was that an effective resource? Did it catch students' attention, or do I need to look for something else? So I think a lot of it is within the teacher themselves, but certainly we do use peer observation. I work in a wonderful department that we collaborate a lot, and so we're in and out of each other's classrooms, and so we're able to bounce ideas off of each other. But again, I'll refer back to the TEL project, that there's a lot of rubrics there that teachers can use for self-evaluation and to set their goals. What are their goals going to be for the year? You can't improve in all areas all at once, so you have to pick and choose, right?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ellen. And I know you're going to tell us a little more about the conference. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about the ICTFL conference, don't go anywhere. We have more content from Linda and Carrie, but we'll also hear more about the conference itself. So if you have questions to Ellen about Danielson Domains or about the conference itself, remember to tweet or to leave a comment on YouTube, and we'll try to get to it. So now we have, I'd like to say hello to Heather. She's watching us and says, excited to be here. Thank you for organizing this. Hello, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, wherever you are. And she's referring to organizing this preview of the conference, but as you can imagine, organizing a full conference is a lot more work than just getting here together.
And look at Ellen. She looks so rested and happy.
But that's why we wanted to give you a little window of what's coming to the fall conference at ICTFL. Linda, what are you going to be sharing with us?
I am so excited to share two different pieces. You'll pull up that slide. Thank you very much. The two focus areas that I'm going to be working with teachers at the conference is both in the area of communication. So in the first piece, we want to think about that learning a language should meet the second language should meet the same goal as you learn your first, and that is really to communicate. So I'm going to be presenting two different sessions on communication. And the first one is how do we use culture and embed that concept of interculturality. So for example, in this very first slide where you see a very interesting cultural item, something that is unique to the Andean region in South America, this happens to be a roasted guinea pig. So the idea of using culture to actually engage students in communication is something that I really work hard on. I'm going to be sharing a lot of strategies and a lot of tips. And the first one really is, what goal do I want to achieve by showing this kind of an image or by presenting some aspect of culture? And so if you'll go to the next slide, I think we this is that one of my actual students on a tour in Ecuador, and he is about to take a bite out of the head. And when I show an image like this, certainly I've engaged my students' attention. And that's the most important piece, that whenever, if we want to elicit great communication from students, we have to engage them in the topic at hand. The second piece is that I look at what can I inform them on. So if I had this, we'll go back one slide. So the second, nope, we'll go to the middle one. So we'll just talk about those big goals for a minute. So the first one might be that I just want to really engage the student's interest. The second one is that I want to inform the student. So there's some cultural information to be gained from this image. The third one is I really sort of want to support some other aspect of my curricular goals. So whether we're talking about the fact that this particular delicacy is enjoyed because the people live above the tree line and there's no place to graze animals, that's a cultural connection that I'm able to make and begin to talk about through an image that's actually engaged my students. We can connect that with things that they know about, like are there particular, we're going to stay there for a few more minutes, that's all right.
We are on you, don't worry, don't worry.
All right, so we want to connect them with other pieces. So if we're talking about, what is it that that I eat that might be particular to my particular geographic region, or I might not eat. We also want to compare and contrast, so that would lead to a great comparison conversation as to why someone might eat something that I don't eat. And I think obviously the idea of amuse and entertain, that's when I show this in a live video form, my students are entertained, a little bit scared, which is another piece. I like to surprise and kind of shock students. All of those things can really engage them in a communication activity in the classroom because everyone has an opinion or a reaction that they want to share. And so I think that's the one piece that we want to look at is cultural in interculturality, but cultural topics as a way to sort of spark and kindle communication in the classroom is a great way to engage the high school learner. And I think that would also work with lower levels as well. And even adults are a little bit intrigued by what is going on. And so this next piece the other topic that I really want to share is the idea of coaching our students to proficiency. As a language teacher, I've always been envious of those coaches in my building. When students talk to a coach, they have that sort of tone of reverence, like Coach said. It's like God said. And I want to have that tone in their voice when they talk to me. And so I really started thinking about how do I coach my students? How do I go alongside and really help them get to proficiency? And so one of the things that we've been doing in my class is using the acronym of TOPE. Vivir al tope is a sort of Spanish phrase that's kind of like a carpe diem. And to do that, we just really want to keep it simple. And so I've used kind of an acronym, but it translates quite well into English and can be worked with, I'm sure, in a number of other languages that you teachers may teach. So the T is that idea of target language, or todo en español. That's the first piece of proficiency, is that we really have to work with the tools that we have. Whatever vocabulary is at our disposal, that's what we're going to use. Whatever structure we've acquired through our practice, that's what we can use. The second letter is the O, which is organized. One of the biggest challenges of proficiency is to really help students extend what we call their text type, or how much they can say, what's the quantity that they can say, and how well and organized is that. We want to move them from a simple phrase to a sentence, to sentences that are longer, to connected sentences, to sentences with transitions that move into paragraphs. And so the more I can emphasize organization and the quantity of what they give me, the more likely that proficiency will grow. And we'll talk about some real specific ways to do that at the conference. We'll also show some great student examples where you'll be able to see their progress. The P is the idea, for me, of just using a variety of vocabulary. In Spanish, that becomes palabras variadas, so that they're not using just the vocabulary we've just practiced, but they're recycling vocabulary, that they're actually adapting and acquiring personalized vocabulary. So if they want to describe themselves and they haven't learned the word for curly, they could learn a personalized vocabulary word so they can describe themselves more efficiently. And then that last letter E is just, again, what I talked about with text type, is that nothing's simple, that we want it to be elaborated. So tell me more, what else can you add? Can you say where, with whom, when, what time? And again, those pieces are things that we'll talk about in more specific ways at the conference. So I can't wait to share it, because my students are really growing in their language proficiency, and we're just keeping it a simple focus. So thank you, Paulina, for the opportunity to talk about my kids and what they're able to do in language.
Thank you. And we do have a comment from Heather, who says, listening to ICTFL 15, coaching kids on proficiency, Linda Eknaz. Good stuff. And here we have your Twitter handle again, miprofeap, so you can follow her and learn more about everything she does. Great. And I would like to ask you about that picture of the food.
Yeah.
And you showed that as an example, and how close is that to the real thing for students who are living it as a representation? You just look at the picture, look at the video, or do they actually go and buy that little food?
No, we don't actually cook in the classroom, but I've sort of show pictures from the furry live little critter all the way to the cooking process, all the way to the end, to the video of the students. And there's an awful lot of reactions, from shock to horror to oh. And when you engage, again, you're engaging their emotions as well as their opinions, and communication results, and that's really the goal.
Excellent. Yes. So it's great to hear that we can bring those emotions and experiences in many different ways. Not always, not all of us have the luxury of cooking in the class or bringing our kids to the place. But it's good to hear about those experiences as well. So thank you very much. And now we have Carrie Toth. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
What are you going to be sharing with us today?
I'm going to be taking what Linda said about communication, and in my session, we're going to be talking about 90% target language. We have to look at our target language kind of as a bullseye, and Ellen actually referenced one of my key points, and that's that we have to have really good, strong planning. When we're giving students target language, if we don't really focus our content into an aerodynamic structure, it's hard for them to be able to hit the bullseye, and the bullseye is to be able to communicate in our target language. We know that they come into class on that first day of level 1 and they're so excited and ready to learn to speak a language, and if we can focus our content, they start to see results really quickly where they feel like they can communicate, and they keep that excitement then throughout the year. So in my session, I'll be addressing all the 3 modes of communication. We'll look at interpretive mode and presentational mode, but tonight I'm just going to give you a peek of some of the things that we do interpersonally in our classroom. And the first one, we have to remember it's the hardest target to hit to get our students to speak interpersonally, because they have so many opportunities to present what they know to us. As teachers, that's something that has always come kind of naturally to me, to assess the students' performance at the end. But to get them talking to each other has been a little bit more of my challenge over the last few years. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed is to bring in actual authentic resources, human authentic resources. The picture that I have on this slide is of Ruben, and Ruben is Guatemalan, and our school supports him through a charity organization, and every fall he comes and speaks to our students, and he interacts then with the students in the target language, and it's so neat to see them prepare, you know, what might we ask him about, and I give them some topics and they think it over, and then they just really get into this conversation with him when he's in the classroom, and it's different than talking to me. When they talk to me every day, they're not as excited as they are when they have somebody else coming in. And I noticed that they really try hard to be impressive. When you bring somebody in that they don't know or that they want to impress, then all of a sudden their language is really beautiful and their sentences are longer and more flowing. And they do things that I'm always surprised about. And so that's one of my first things. If you know people, we all, as language teachers, we almost always have connections all over the world with people that we've toured with or people we studied with in school or where we studied abroad. Try and find ways to bring those people into your classroom, whether by Skype or actually face-to-face with your students. That audience is such an important key in getting your students excited about communicating in the language, more than just communicating with you. I also like to try and do some activities where my students are talking to each other about their own opinions on topics. And so this is one of the activities that I actually picked up from another conference, to use hula hoops to do things like Venn diagrams. And what I found is that if I come up with some ideas, this is actually during our biodiversity unit, and we had been talking about the watershed. We live in Carlisle, Illinois. We have a lake, and our watershed has some particular issues. And we studied, through a tour guide in Panama, we studied the Panama Canal watershed, and we found that there were a lot of similarities in the two watersheds. And so my students' task was to take these different statements about a watershed and decide, did it describe the Carlisle Lake one, the Panama Canal one, or both? And so all of their discussion about where to put them had to be in Spanish, and it was great to hear them giving their opinions and defending their opinions, because at a level 3 and 4, that's what I want my students to be doing, to be able to support what they believe in and to have an opinion and keep it, and to say when they think something's right or wrong. One of the things people often ask about this activity is, how do you make sure that the conversation stays in target language? And I'll tell you the little tip that I have had a gold mine with last year is that so many of my students have cell phones, smartphones, and so I have them get out their iPhones and put them on the table and start the audio note app and record what they're saying, and then they send them to me in my email, and I never even have to look at them. Just knowing that those messages are going to be coming to me, they stay in the target language pretty much 100%, and I sometimes listen to little clips of them just to make sure I can come back and fool them with, oh, hey, I heard you say blah, blah, blah. That was a really good job. But that way I can go around to each group and be listening in and kind of participating in the conversations with them, but know that they're still on target even if I'm at the next group over. I also like to do centers. It was something that I never thought I would be able to do in my classroom because we are low on technology in my school district, but I've found some ways to put some tech together to do centers, and what that allows me to do is do a speaking center with my students. And so as they move from center to center, doing some kind of discovery and inquiry about the topic that we're getting ready to begin studying, I actually get a chance to sit down with small groups of students who come to my center, and we just talk about what they already know about that topic and what they think they might like to learn about the topic and any preconceived notions that they have about the topic. And it's really cool because I'm kind of, 1-on-3, I don't get a big chance to do that very often. And I wondered if the students would try and avoid that center because they didn't want to have to do the talk to the teacher. But it's actually turned out to be one of the more popular ones. They fight a little bit over getting the time to come over and just chat. They feel like it's just a time for us to talk together. So those are just some ways, and tons more. I mean, I have dozens of ways that we can really look at using 90% target language in the classroom so that we can prepare our students to be proficient language speakers, even leaving high school, that they'll have some proficiency so they'll be confident and go on to be lifelong language learners.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure we'll hear more at your presentation at the ICTFL Fall Conference. Anyone, remember that you can attend even if you're not in Illinois. And I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
One from Christy Placido, and she's asking, how do you prioritize or maximize the 10% non-target language? So I remember your session talks about the 90% we use the target language. What happens with the other 10?
I think that depends teacher to teacher, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. I know that a lot of teachers use that 10% target language to give instructions to their classroom, or certain classroom commands and things that they don't want to spend their time teaching those students how to do that. Some people prefer to do different tasks in the classroom in English. In my classroom, I really use that 10% to establish meaning with the kids. Whatever new material we're doing, I'm trying to make sure that they understand what we're talking about and make sure they understand all of the new words and structures that we're using. And then as I'm confident that they understand those, I pull that scaffolding away, and then we move on to new structures. So mine is a very targeted 10% toward just establishing a meaning with the kids about what all of this new stuff is that we're working with and where we're going with it.
Great. And going back to the 90%, we have a question from Carol, and she says, how do we keep students with low literacy enrolled in our classes? How do we maintain 90% target language with pre or low literacy students?
That has been one of my missions for the last couple years. I want to see the kids that have traditionally dropped out of foreign language programs stay in the language program. And so that's why that 10% establishing meaning for me has been so important, because I've found that even at high school level, even in an educated community, I have very low literacy students that come into my classroom. I don't have any pre-literate, but I think that establishing meaning would be the same as with a low literacy student. I really have to keep going back to establish that meaning with them, and then work with the structure very slowly with them. And they might need a little more scaffolding than the other students. And so I try to break up a lot like what Linda said. I have self-selected vocabulary. So my lowest literacy students are really working with just a core group of vocabulary and structures. And then there's kind of the impress me structures, and then there's the, oh my gosh, I'm a genius structures. And those kids can make their own list. As we go through any type of unit of study, they're taking the vocabulary that they think is the most interesting and meaningful. And I find that they reproduce it then in all of their speaking and writing assessments, because it's meaningful to them. Like, they chose that word to be part of their list. So they're a lot more successful incorporating the new vocabulary when they've had a little bit of ownership of it.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you all three for sharing this preview of what's coming up in your fall conference. Now, we started talking about one of the big umbrella overarching, the big theme, this conference are the Danielson Domains and how teachers are going to be evaluated. And I know that for some teachers, this is very new, and it might be a little scaring. And some teachers might look like this when they think about teacher evaluation. But I'm sure that these leaders of the ICTFL conference have an answer. The conference can help. So, Ellen, you talked a little bit of how the Danielson Domains will be integrated into this conference. I would like if you can give us a little more information about the conference itself.
Absolutely. Well, our conference is October 15th through the 17th. In Tinley Park, Illinois, at the Tinley Park Convention Center. And all the information about the conference can be found on our ICTFL website, which is ictfl.org. But just to give you, Linda and Carrie gave you a preview of what they're going to do, but maybe you're thinking, hey, I think these sessions would be really great, but I want to know a little bit more. So maybe you feel like you need a little more help in your planning. So we have a lot of sessions on planning. For example, maybe you want to learn about IPAs, integrated performance assessments. We have a session on integrated performance assessments. Maybe you feel like you need to incorporate some more technology into your classroom. We have lots of sessions on how to use technology, keeping it in the target language, certainly. Carrie's going to be talking about that, but we have some other ones as well. What about your special needs students? that was a question that Carrie sort of alluded to, but we have specific sessions. How do you reach your special needs students? What can you do in your world language classrooms to specifically support them and target them? Practical ideas for students with special needs. Maybe you feel like you have all of those things under your belt, but you just need some other ideas about how you can grow professionally. We have lots of opportunities there as well. Maybe you want to learn about oral proficiency interview. We're going to have a session on OPI. We're going to have sessions about interviewing. Maybe you're looking for a new job, some tips on how to interview. What are some things that you might want to put on your resume, or ways to get involved to make you stand out as a candidate. So all of those things are going to be highlighted on our Friday in our Friday grid, and then on Saturday we have a lot more looking at can-do statements. What are students able to do in the language, and making sure that you're keeping it real for them. I'm looking at our conference grid right now as I talk to you. What about teaching without a textbook? What if you're teaching and they say, okay, you're going to teach AP this year, but you don't have a textbook. So what are some strategies that you can use to help you get through the year? So we've got a lot of things for teachers at all different levels, for new teachers, for experienced teachers, and for teachers who just need to refresh and get some more ideas.
Great. Good. And just like Ellen mentioned, you can find more information at the ICTFL website, ictfl.org. You can find them on Twitter with ICTFL, and you can interact with any of these three great teachers also on Twitter. You have the Twitter handles on the screen. If you're watching the recording, if you're watching live, thank you for being live with us. But if you're watching our recording, you can also submit your questions or get in touch with any of them after this show. And I'm sure they'll get back to you and give you any information you need about the conference or what they are presenting. So I hope that everyone takes advantage. Remember that the hashtag ICTFL15, ICTFL15, will be the way that you can learn from this conference, but hopefully many of you have been inspired to go attend in person, to meet these lovely ladies, but also to get a wealth of information from the Illinois conference. I would like to say thank you very much to our presenters today. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Paulina.
Thank you, Linda.
De nada.
Thank you, Ellen.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Great. And thank you all for watching. I hope to hear from you as well. And have a great day wherever you are in the world. Adios.
Adios.
Adios.